After stepping up to Kevin Hart's live roast and hitting extremely personal jabs at him over their long-running dispute, Katt Williams stunned the audience. However, outrage erupted online when some of Katt's jokes became viral. Additionally, it has been claimed that a number of his forthcoming gigs are being canceled. Kevin Hart and Katt Williams performed together on stage at the Kia Forum in Englewood, California, on May 10, 2026. The audience was unaware of what was going to happen at Netflix's live event, the Roast of Kevin Hart, which was a part of the Netflix Is a Joke festival. No one had noticed this one on the bill, but the roast had already burnt through a lineup of big hitters. Katt Williams, dressed in a long black leather cape and a black helmet, was introduced to the stage by actress Regina Hall. The room exploded. This roster was not planned. This man had been telling anyone who would listen that Kevin Hart was not who people believed him to be for the better part of 10 years. He was now inside the man's own party. Regina Hall, a fellow roster member, revealed Williams as an unexpected guest. The Atlanta native wasn't holding back while criticizing Hart's comedic and acting abilities. Additionally, he jokingly restated his opinion that Hart had stolen everything from him in terms of his career. During his performance, Williams kept a sharp tongue, making jokes that Hart was a 6 feet 3 inches white man before witnessing his act. He later withdrew his earlier remark that Hart was a puppet and clarified that Kevin might be forced to do anything by the Netflix CEO. Each joke went off like a grenade. The crowd simultaneously yelled, cringed, and laughed. Williams was composed and in charge. He appeared to be a man who had been waiting a long time to say all of this, and he was going to take his time now that he had the space. Williams made a joke about Hart robbing him of everything. In response, Hart made fun of the notion that Williams had declined popular films like Central Intelligence, Jumanji, and Ride Along. The entire picture is contained in that back and forth. Two men who developed their professions simultaneously. One of them is now doing it in front of a crowded arena on a live Netflix video without a script to hide behind, saying that the other's triumph came at his expense. In response, Williams moved to give Hart a hug and handshake as the crowd erupted in cheers, making it one of the roast's most memorable moments. However, the narrative didn't finish with that hug. Hart's following words completely destroyed the peace offering, so it was hardly even the midst of it. Furthermore, what Katt had said in the set before to that embrace was just the most recent development in a conflict that had been developing for more than 10 years. You have to go back at where it all began and who these two men were before the world had to choose a side in order to comprehend why that stage at the Kia Forum felt like the last act of something huge. There is more to the tale of Katt Williams and Kevin Hart than just a celebrity feud. It's a clash between two careers that were destined to collide. Because only one of them would receive a larger platform in the realm of black stand-up comedy, they were occupying the same area at the same time. Katt Williams and Kevin Hart have a long-standing feud in black comedy. Katt Williams has a longer history. He was renowned for being the first short black man with a lot of energy who made big expressions and overacted on stage. He was into that. When Kevin Hart appeared, the similarities were made right away. They both had a lot of energy and were brief. It seems that Kevin didn't care about appearing in poor films, thus he was eager to accept any position that Katt would turn down. Kevin followed that path and became extremely well-known. Katt kind of took a different route. Very well-known in the comic community, but not in the general public, and involved in legal troubles. It's all about the pathways diverging. Because it was getting difficult to ignore the numbers by the time Kevin Hart's movie career took off in the early 2010s. Since roughly 2014, when Hart's cinematic career took off with Ride Along with Last Night and Think Like a Man 2, there has been a public feud between Hart and Williams. Katt Williams used a passive-aggressive tone in his remarks back then, and he later claimed to have helped Kevin Hart become the comedian he is today. Then, in 2016, Katt ceased to be passive. During Kevin Hart's conspiracy theory comedy tour in Atlanta in 2016, Katt Williams claimed that Hart was a Hollywood puppet. The term puppet came to define the whole conflict. It was more than an insult. It was a thesis. In front of a live audience, Katt was claiming that Hart's ascent wasn't natural, that there was a manipulator, that Hart had been selected over him by the industry. Hart was more manageable, not because he was more gifted. Hart retaliated, but at the time, he did so calmly. In public, the two guys maintained a tired distance from one another. Katt wasn't finished, though. By 2017, Williams had attacked actress Tiffany Haddish for her quick rise to popularity. Hart chose to stand up for Haddish just before they co-starred in the movie Night School, which sparked his conflict with Williams. Hart's defense of Haddish was more than just loyalty to a co-star, which made that moment noteworthy. Hart was sketching a line. He was openly criticizing Katt Williams for going too far. By asking Tiffany Haddish why her movie girls trip was so successful, Katt had dragged her into the conflict. Kevin responded by defending Tiffany in an interview on The Breakfast Club on the Atlanta station V103. Now, more than just the two men were involved in the feud. It had engulfed other individuals' professions and reputations, and that habit of making allegations against others in Hart's vicinity. Over the ensuing years, cardiac responding would again occur, getting worse each time until it reached an unanticipated level. Because by January 2024, Katt Williams was doing more than just making jokes on radio shows or during comedic performances. The entire world watched as he sat down for a 3-hour recorded discussion. January 3rd, 2024. On that day, Katt Williams effectively dropped a cultural bomb on the entertainment business. Club Shay, Shannon Sharpe's podcast, served as the vehicle. Kevin Hart was at the top of the list of people Katt felt had harmed him, cheated on him, or gotten promoted at his expense. Of all the celebrities who made headlines in 2024, Katt Williams had the biggest and most viral year because he was deemed a prophet of chaos by millions of followers and detractors. Since January 3rd, there has been a persistent joke that he created a gateway by venting his complaints about his comic contemporaries and the shadowy side of the entertainment business. Over 86 million people saw the unrestrained comic reveal inflated facts, jokes, and hypotheses during his Club Shay chat. 86 million people have seen the nearly 3-hour film, which is not a podcast segment that has gone viral. It's a cultural event. In group chats at work, people were watching it and calling their pals to rewind and watch it again. Katt wasn't using ambiguous language, which is why it struck so hard. He gave names. He leveled particular charges. And he did it with a calm assurance that had others wondering whether he truly knew things that no one else did. He named a number of performers and comedians in it, including Steve Harvey, Ricky Smiley, Kevin Hart, and Cedric the Entertainer. However, because Katt didn't simply refer to Kevin Hart as a puppet once more, the Kevin Hart segment attracted the greatest attention. He went farther. Katt also lashed out at Kevin Hart, accusing him of being an industry plant who entered a TV show deal without earning his stripes in comedy clubs. Similar to the genre's greats, Katt claimed that nobody in Hollywood can recall seeing a sold-out Kevin Hart performance and that there was never a cue for him to receive a standing ovation at any comedy club. He added that when he arrived, he already had his deals. Have we heard of a comedian who moved to Los Angeles and starred in his own film, Soul Plane, and got his own comedy on network television during his first year there? In essence, Katt called Kevin the comedic equivalent of Jussie Smollett, a charlatan placed in the film industry. Hart's response was prompt and calculated after he arrived in Los Angeles from Philadelphia with no genuine buzz and claims to have declined numerous lowbrow gigs that Kevin gladly accepted. Although Kevin Hart described Katt's remarks as depressing, he didn't waste the chance to promote his next action film lift. The move was vintage Hart, especially with all the unwanted press from the interview. Accept the blow. Deflect the story. Continue to advance the brand. However, Katt was not going to back down. Later in the year, he disclosed something unsettling about the purpose of that interview. "I was trying to do something there that hadn't been done," he said. "I thought I had figured out the algorithm mathematically, and I thought I could show that when I wrote it out to kill the careers of the people that I was talking about." Katt went on to say, "I thought that I had figured out the algorithm mathematically, and I thought that I could show that. And when I wrote it out to kill the careers of the people I was talking about. But it was so vicious that I erased all of the knockout blows and just left the jabs." Harvey, in particular, took a beating for being a country bumpkin who stole jokes from comedian Mark Curry in the Steve Harvey Show concept. He stopped making jabs. The knockout blows were more severe. The world will probably never hear what Katt Williams decided to withhold during that 3-hour session. However, his remarks were sufficient to change the public discourse surrounding Kevin Hart for several months. And for Kevin Hart, that cloud would not go away because what Katt said in January 2024 would accompany him into a year that was already beginning to fall apart. Kevin Hart's career was not destroyed by the Club Shay interview.
He ensured that.
He continued to move, promoted films, remained visible, and joked about the entire situation. Beneath his public demeanor, however, was a different story. Hart has had a difficult year for his public image, and it's not only because of Katt Williams. The celebrity rarely posts with his wife Eno Hart and abruptly closed his Hart House restaurants earlier that year without making a public remark after the Club Shay incident. There was no notification, no farewell post, and the restaurant closures were silent and inexplicable. They simply vanished. Even if that might not have much significance on its own, it was a part of a pattern that people began to notice. Kevin Hart-related items were discreetly vanishing. Heartbeat, Hart's media company, was the most significant of those items and the one that eventually formed its own story. Additionally, the story of that company's demise reads like a warning. Heartbeat, which was previously valued at $650 million following a merger and significant investment in 2022, has recently encountered internal difficulties for every star who has ever attempted to create an empire. Reports state that workers have been affected by several rounds of layoffs, podcast projects have stopped, and film and television development has halted. According to reports, Hart, who returned to the CEO position in 2025, has resigned from day-to-day duties, leaving longtime associates to manage the business. There was more than one round of layoffs. They arrived in waves. Days before Thanksgiving in late 2024, Heartbeat let go of roughly 20 workers, around 25% of its employment of about 80 employees. December 2025 then arrived. Subsequent cuts were made to the podcast section, marketing, social media, scripted TV, and brand partnerships. Early in 2025, Kevin Hart took over again as CEO. There was nothing he could do. Within 15 months, 2 previous CEOs departed. In late 2023, Ty Randolph left. Jay Levine then left. Around the same time, the chief content officer and CFO also quit. The executive ranks were ripped apart by disagreements over strategy, and the number of canceled shows increased. Now, a number of projects are either frozen or defunct. A TV version of a barbershop was put on hold. Season 2 of Lil Kev was canceled. Once promising podcasts were either canceled or never launched. Tiffany Brown and Mike Stein, the previous heads of Heartbeat's TV division, were also sacked in recent years. They were in the middle of developing the second season of the BET Plus cartoon series Lil Kev and a TV adaptation of the comedy film Barbershop from the 2000s. Subsequently, the lawsuit was filed, which led to the full public disclosure of the internal breakdown. Leslie Guam and Eric Eddings were hired to further Heartbeat's audio goals. Rather, their employment vanished, their projects delayed, and a lawsuit ensued. These initiatives were created, but not given the go-ahead to proceed. Heartbeat allegedly dismissed Eddings and Guam and sued them for allegedly stealing trade secrets and breach of contract after they started their own business and started raising money. The lawsuit is still pending because the court determined that the allegations were too general, unclear, and confusing. To anybody who would listen, Heartbeat's employees painted an image of a leader who had checked out for Bloomberg. Workers complained that Hart was harder to reach. After the layoffs, he disappeared from the office for weeks or perhaps months. It is said that he updated his phone number. There were no staff meetings. The pace of development slowed. In exchange for equity and an undisclosed sum, Hart agreed to give his name, image, and likeness to Authentic Brands Group, the company behind the estates of Marilyn Monroe and Muhammad Ali. He left behind the endorsement deals that had kept Heartbeat afloat. For Heartbeat as a standalone production firm, some saw it as the beginning of the end. While Kevin Hart continued to attend red carpet events, book specials, and uphold his reputation, all of this, the layoffs, the canceled shows, the lawsuits, and the leadership void, was taking place in the background. However, Katt Williams had practically written the script beforehand. He predicted that the machine surrounding Hart would eventually reveal itself, and it was now clearly doing so. Return to May 10th, 2026, the Kia Forum. Katt Williams just wrapped up his performance. It's an electrifying arena. Hart then leaves the stage to address the man who had spent years attempting to destroy his reputation, rather than to wrap up the performance. The atmosphere drastically altered when Hart took the stage at the conclusion of Katt Williams' roast performance. "Me and this man have been at odds for years on years," Hart said. "Katt, we have an opportunity in real time. This is live television to put our _ beef behind us. I am offering you an olive branch of peace," Hart added. "I want to go on, Katt. Can we move on, man? I want to be a brother and a buddy. Can we move on?" In response, Williams approached Hart and gave him a hug and handshake. The audience erupted in cheers, making it one of the roast's most memorable moments. The cameras captured both men's faces as the handshake and hug took place. After nearly 10 years of public tension, including previous interviews and allegations of industry favoritism, their reconciliation appeared to be genuine for a brief moment. However, Hart continued talking, and what he said next either destroyed the entire moment or, depending on your point of view, made it even better. Later that evening, Kevin Hart threw some shade. "The reconciliation moment was some of the best acting I've ever done in my career," he joked, adding, "I did not mean one word of what I said. Katt Williams, it was a joke." Although it was likely intended as a joke, the timing and manner in which he said it left many people very perplexed. Media pundits assessing the event saw anything telling. Was the olive branch genuine? Was the whole thing a bit? Did Katt Williams know that's where Hart was going to land? "I felt like I could feel Katt Williams rolling his eyes in his mind," one person said. "I believe he simply said, 'You know what? I'm going to shake your hand, but I have not been paid to be here any more than I was.' And then he simply left the stage." He doesn't even recognize Kevin's words. The analysis went on. It wasn't exactly a "let's squash the beef" situation. And that was essentially Kevin's attempt to maintain his dignity. Additionally, it was observed that at the conclusion of a roast, people usually say, "We do it because we love," and at the end of the day, "Kevin, thank you." However, Katt failed to do so, and even after the apparent peace, observers are still dubious about whether the beef was actually resolved. After all, there's a good chance that Katt Williams may subsequently be interviewed and disparage Kevin Hart. When Williams accused Hart of being an industry plant and stealing projects from him in an interview with the popular club Shawshay in 2024, the hostilities significantly reappeared. Hart later disclosed this on Carmelo Anani's 7:00 p.m. The M. According to the Brooklyn podcast, the two had had a private conversation and had begun the process of improving their situation. Thus, this is the whole image. In slow motion, two individuals from the same lane accuse each other of stealing his career. 86 million people watched a 3-hour interview. A media firm that collapsed due to lawsuits, canceled shows, and dismissed management. Then, in front of a crowded arena on live television, the person being hugged instantly told everyone that he didn't mean a word of it. Over the past 10 years, their feud, which has involved accusations, public insults, job disputes, and industry favoritism, has grown to become one of the most prominent rivalries in stand-up comedy. There was no cancellation of the Kia Forum performance. It was a huge event that continues to be discussed. However, the show as a whole, which portrays Kevin Hart as an unstoppable force and a machine that cannot be stopped or questioned, has been exhibiting serious indicators of cancellation. Kevin Hart wasn't broken by Katt Williams, but he might have been the first to declare loudly, explicitly, and with receipts that the machine wasn't as reliable as it appeared to be. Therefore, it appears that Katt Williams was partially correct on that specific issue based on the Bloomberg reporting, the lawsuits, the individuals who were laid off, and the projects that were later shelved. There is currently no definitive explanation regarding whether the handshake was genuine, whether the beef is actually dead, or whether Heartbeat survives. Heartbeat is currently a smaller, quieter business that is undergoing restructuring in order to survive. Hart's next actions and the harsh economics of contemporary entertainment will determine whether it can recover or will continue to wither. This is settled. Uninvited, Katt Williams entered Kevin Hart's party, stated all he had ever wanted to say about the guy, took an embrace, and left the stage with a victory, or at the very least, a guarantee that the evening would never be forgotten.